Hey everyone, these are your notes for our unit Introduction to the Epic Journey. The story we're going to focus on is called the Odyssey. It's in two parts actually, the Iliad and the Odyssey. They are the first ever known to be told by Homer, very, very long time ago. I'm just going to go briefly over the notes, kind of explain them to you. You do not need to copy them. We're just going to kind of reference them throughout all these assignments, so you do need to go back several times to them, and you are going to do several assignments. So we're going to go ahead and get started. First, this is what's called an epic. An epic is a very, very long narrative poem. Poem because people told them, they didn't write them down. So they had to memorize, or at least memorize most of it. So a poem, of course, is easier to memorize. And because it's a narrative, they could add things or delete things if they forgot them. It details a very dangerous journey of a hero, always male, of course, and his tasks in seeking some type of revenge for a personal wrongdoing. Examples include someone stole his wife, someone killed his brother, they kidnapped his child, they set his home on fire. It just really depends on the story. It also includes historical facts based on the culture, and it's blended with different cultural legends. The Odyssey is Greek, so this is all Greek mythology, Greek goddesses, gods. That's why they're supernatural forces and divine beings, monsters. Because it's a very long poem, it is not only set in one place. It is set in multiple places, usually kingdoms and islands and mountains with lots of different and diverse weather. Weather is always an indicator of mood, symbol, and foreshadowing. An epic hero. An epic hero always reflects the values of his culture. That is important to understand, especially when you watch the movie, The Odyssey, because Odysseus does not seem like he would fit the ideals of our culture. However, this is ancient Greek mythology, so they had very, very different values. So, what they valued. Someone who values honor and generosity among his friends and family, meaning that first and foremost, he believes in honor to him and for him, and he believes that people should be generous to him and for him. Uh, he always uses his brain, which means he's very intelligent. He's, of course, to us, very arrogant, but in that context, he would be full of pride and what's called his brawn. His brawn is his physical strength. As you probably know from seeing many, many of these films, they always seem to have some type of exceptional strength when they most need it, when they're fighting some horrible monster. And he's very victorious over supernatural beings. Again, because he uses all those things, his brain, his pride or arrogance, or his brawn. And just to add in some different kind of conflict, he encounters worldly temptations. This is to show that he is a human and not a god or a goddess. So in this case, of course, this would be females. This would be treasure, curiosity. The idea of an epic is also a myth, and again, is based on culture. So, what a myth is, it's a traditional story that is told to explain some type of religious belief or a different type of phenomenon, volcanoes, tidal waves, diseases, in an ancient type of society. They are mostly fictitious, meaning that they have no actual basis in reality. And they usually include, again, divine beings, different type of monsters, or magical creatures. The way they were told, of course, is what's called rhapsodes. The rhapsodes would be musical storytellers. They would entertain crowds for hours upon hours with their great, amazing tales. Of course, as we said, they had to memorize them. So they had to be rhythmic, they had to be poetical, or poetic, sorry. And they had to be kind of sing-songy. So they would often include songs and music along with it, dancing, anything to entertain crowds of thousands and thousands of. Now, some very, very common epic themes are kind of spread across many cultures. And ones that you will notice, especially in the movie, are the following. First, there is courage to face the seemingly impossible. It is the idea that humans, of course, are flawed. Humans, of course, cannot do every single thing in the world. But what most epics want to show you is that you need courage, and what you thought was impossible can also become possible. Second, it's forging alliances with different divine beings. It is the idea, of course, the theme that is very, very overused, that you die alone or you live together or die alone, either way you want to put it. So it is the idea that, of course, that you need to have a community. You need to make sure that you're forging alliances with the right gods and goddesses who they believed, or at least in their culture, that they controlled aspects of the ancient world. Again, it depends on the culture, Greek, Roman, wherever, but they believe different types of gods and goddesses controlled those aspects. Number three, it's finding a true identity and your home. One very, very important theme that kind of cuts across many, many stories, not just epics, is the idea that people, by their nature, need to find out who they truly are, their personality, what they're good at, what they're bad at, their goals, all that kind of stuff. And that is emphasized strongly in the Odyssey. Finally, home. Home has many interpretations. Usually in epics, it's a physical home or the people that make up his home. As for Odysseus, he is trying to get home after 20 years. He has a wife and he has a son. And four is the idea of loyalty and intelligence to determine fate. What that means is that, as we said, an epic hero always, always values who is loyal to him. And he also has to be very smart. It's the idea that most people are not loyal and not smart, and that's what that is what makes an epic hero very, very different. So that is why he will survive, while very many others are going to die. Now, to understand the Odyssey, you have to understand a little bit of the background. So, the background. The very, very, very first story that was made was called the Iliad. This is about 800 BC. So, to summarize the Iliad, there was a war called the Trojan War. The Trojan War was when the Paris of Troy captured, kidnapped, whatever you want to call it, persuaded Queen Helen of Sparta, who is King Menelaus' wife, to go live with him. You can interpret that how you want. Thus, or as a result, Agamemnon, Achilles, Odysseus, and all the other Greek kings had to go to Troy. So they went and sailed off, and they fought for 10 years. So the Iliad takes place actually during that very, very, very last year where Achilles decides to quarrel with Agamemnon. Eventually, they form a truce, and Achilles kills Hector, who happens to be Paris's brother. That is a big, big, big turning point in the whole story. So then Achilles dies. So most parts or most movies, especially the movie The Odyssey, emphasizes this was the part where all hope was lost. However, Odysseus, being smart and tricky, was able to think of the Trojan horse, which you have seen referenced in a lot of other movies and in real life, the trick to win the war. You will see that in the movie as well, as they will provide background for this in the first 30 minutes or so. Now, to understand the Odyssey, you have to understand the following. First, after Odysseus and the Greeks beat the Trojans with the Trojan horse, they decided to set sail back to their homelands. Now, it is always assumed that everyone else made it safely because they never really talk about it, although we know that a few of them did in the movie. Now, the problem with Odysseus, as you know, is he is very arrogant. So that is very much overemphasized in the film. But as a result, he angers Poseidon. Now, Poseidon is the sea god, and if you can think about it, he has to sail from Troy all the way to Ithaca on water. So that is one reason why he is not able to get home and why it takes him 10 years. He does have a whole crew with him. It never really says how many people. The film, of course, kind of minimizes it, but he probably had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people to start from Troy all the way to Ithaca. Now, meanwhile, Ithaca, that's the island he is from, we have Telemachus, who was his son, who is now growing up without his father for a good 20 years, and his wife Penelope, who are very vulnerable. Now, eventually, of course, we would call them suitors, or at least in the book they call them suitors, also in the movie. You can call them what you like, are trying to do three things. First, they want to convince Odysseus' wife that Odysseus is dead, and to marry one of them. Penelope is not having any of that, so she is trying her best to fend them off. Number 2, they are trying to steal all the riches from his kingdom. That would include food, that would include animals, that would include everything that is involved in his kingdom. And third, to make that all work, they have to kill the one and only heir, which is Telemachus, Odysseus' only son. Now, that would seem a little bit easier than you might imagine, but in the movie, of course, it's not as easy as it looks. Now, to kind of understand, here is a visual of his actual journey. Now, the movie kind of simplifies this. There are a lot of things that aren't in the movie. For example, it says he starts in Troy and then goes to the Cicones and the Lotus Eaters, and then the Cyclops. Well, the movie decides to take you from Troy right to the Cyclops. They eliminate number 2 and number 3. There are a lot of other eliminations in the actual movie, so this is what it actually looked like for 10 years. You can see where he started, number 1. Number 1 is Troy, where he fought 10 years in a war. Now, number 16 is his kingdom, which actually, if you think about it, doesn't really look that far away. However, because Poseidon is angry at him, he decides to take them all over the ancient Greek world. So you can always reference this back to see where he went. Again, not every single